All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Politics and Prose. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of the bookstore, and it's truly a pleasure to be hosting Tom Johnson, who's here to talk about his new memoir, Driven, A Life in Public Service and Journalism, from LBJ to CNN. Now, Tom started in journalism while still in high school, working for a paper in Georgia, and continued there after college. But after going to Washington during the Johnson administration as a member of the first class of White House fellows, he stayed on and held several positions that gave him a close-up view of how the president and other top officials dealt with the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and other consequential developments. He then followed LBJ back to Texas after the president left office, and Tom ended up heading an Austin TV station owned by LBJ. After LBJ's death, Tom became editor and publisher of the Dallas Times-Herald, then moved on to the Los Angeles Times, where he rose to be the first non-Chandler family member to serve as publisher and CEO. In 1990, he shifted from print to television, becoming president of CNN at a time the global news organization was still a bit of an upstart. Overseeing the network for 11 years, Tom presided over both triumphant and controversial moments. One particular high point came early in Tom's tenure when, at the start of the Gulf War in 1991, CNN scooped the competition, reporting in real time from Baghdad, marking what was the first live broadcast of a war. In the 24 years since he left CNN, Tom has remained active as an advisor to media moguls, a volunteer for the Mayo Clinic and the MD Anderson Cancer Center, and a mentor to younger colleagues. His book recounts not only the impressive life he's led at the intersection of politics and the news media, and his personal ties with such major figures and mentors as LBJ, Otis Chandler, and Ted Turner, but also his long battle with depression, which he revealed some time ago after years of keeping the condition private. As he says in an author's note, while his experiences in media and government may add something of historical value to researchers and archivists, he hopes that sharing the story of his painful journey with chronic depression will help others deal with this mysterious illness. Now, Tom ends his book with a chapter of 37 lessons that life has taught him. The last is, when meeting someone you don't know, don't ask, "What do you do?" but rather say, "Tell me about yourself." Now, if you did that with Tom, as his book shows, you'd get lucky and hear one captivating story after another. In conversation with Tom will be someone who knows him well, Judy Woodruff, herself a renowned figure in broadcast news. Judy's reported for 5 decades and held prominent positions, first with NBC News, then PBS, then CNN, then back to PBS, where she was anchor and managing editor of the NewsHour until late 2022. She remains a senior correspondent at the NewsHour. She first met Tom in the 1980s, and the two became friends in the 1990s when he hired her away to be a CNN anchor, and she wrote the foreword to Tom's book. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tom Johnson and Judy Woodruff. Just sit over there. Yeah. I moved you on.
Quite close conditions and ways. And there's many people, I don't think there's anybody here I ever fired. I look around this room and I see a number of people I recruited, starting with Judy.
Tommy, you have to come into the view of the camera, okay? You remember the camera.
This is called working the crowd before you even start. I can't tell you how thrilled I am, what an honor it is for me to be sitting here with Tom Johnson, who was a major factor in my life.
I had to chase her around.
No, I'm asking the question. We'll let you tell that story later, much later. What an honor it is. And as I look out at this crowd, I see a number of people who worked with you and people who work for you.
Too many.
Who are huge fans and who know many stories about Tom Johnson. But I have the delicious task, first of all, of getting to read the galleys, and as Tom said, being asked to write the foreword, which I was so honored to do. But then to now have the wonderful job of asking you questions at my favorite bookstore, Politics and Prose. So Tom, all right. You grew up in modest circumstances in the city of Macon, Georgia. Your father, I think, is this right, a third grade education? Yes. Your mother graduated from high school,
yes.
But her family was not able to send her to college. You had what you describe as a happy childhood. You had a lot of friends. Where did the drive? The title is Driven. Where did the drive in Tom Johnson come from?
In my early years, I looked and saw how life was across the river, seriously, the Ocmulgee River in Macon. I saw how the business people lived. I saw how the doctors lived, and I saw how the lawyers lived. And we were not in that condition. In any case, even at 14, I needed a job. I needed a job that would, at that point, 14-year-olds could do two types of jobs under the Georgia laws. You could either work in a grocery store or you could work in a newspaper. And I was so fortunate to get a chance to work on the Macon Telegraph as really the lowest possible level. It was really, they called it a sports stringer, and bringing in the sports scores of the local high school team, either calling them in or bringing them down. But I just was around interesting reporters and editors, and I found them exciting, interesting people, and they showed great personal interest in me, taught me how to type, 3 fingers on this hand, 2 on this hand, and I still use that typing technique. But also, I mean, they really showed some interest, and it showed me how much of a difference that a reporter, particularly in some of these towns, can make. And I had certain beats like the hospital beat and the sheriff's beat and others. And we occasionally ran into some situations that needed reporting that were not necessarily the ones that the readers would like to see, but particularly those who were directly affected. I worked for a publisher who said, we have a rule, any person who is apprehended for drunk driving, and there was every day a little chart of drunk drivers. Well, guess what? One afternoon, the wife of the publisher, Peyton Anderson, name showed on that list, and we checked to see should she run, her name run, and he said absolutely, and that said a lot about the sort of the culture of that newspaper at the time, and also at a time when segregation was sweeping the South. His was very much an independent newspaper, supported even LBJ, which was not popular in that part of the world after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, but I really fell in love with it.
You went to segregated schools.
I went to a segregated school, not only segregated by race, but by sex. There was Lanier High for boys and Lanier High for girls. And I mean, it's serious. That always sounds a little bit strange now as I look back, but that didn't keep us from interacting.
One of the things, okay. One of the things, we can talk about that too. One of the things that comes through, aside from your smarts, which is very clearly woven through this book, is your work ethic. You probably worked hard, not probably, you worked harder than just about anybody else in any situation you were in. Where did that come from?
Learned, I'm serious. My test scores were not at the very top of the class, but I could outwork. I could, whether it was in the workplace or whether it's in class. I mean, I knew that I was not among the smartest people to attend Harvard Business School, but I worked at getting through there. I was a journalism major with no quantitative background, whatever. 4 years of French, a couple of years of English, but I could work and get it. And it's something that I could see that outworking the other people coming to work earlier, leaving later, was recognized by the people above me. And in fact, the publisher of the paper called me in and said, "What are you going to do about college?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Anderson, I hope that I can attend the university." I did not tell him that I had not the resources to do it. Well, he said, "Everybody says you're the hardest working person around here." And he not only founded a full financial aid scholarship to the University of Georgia, but 2 full years at Harvard Business School on financial aid. And I know it was because of that work. It also, I urge everybody not to become a workaholic, as I did. And many of you are in this room. Shelby Coffey's in this room, Larry Register in this room. I mean, I go up and down the people whose faces I see here. Easton Jordan, Larry Register, Asier Hamdar. I just found that my success was in part, if not in large part, from just being able to outwork. But I always tried to do it in a way where I worked with people. And that's so important. Ted Turner taught us all a lot about, you don't work for me, pal, you work with me.
So that work ethic, that propelled you from Macon through college, Harvard Business School, White House fellowship under when President Lyndon Johnson was in office. And you very quickly were pulled into a very small group of people around the President of the United States. This all happened in a short period of time. This was 1965
Yes.
when you came to the White House. How did that happen? I mean, what you write a lot in the book, fascinating. If you haven't read the book, you've got to read it.
But
Fascinating about
if you would, hundreds of copies. You could. Dee Rose, I see is on the back. There are people here tonight that can afford hundreds of copies. So,
but what was it about LBJ, about President Johnson? What was it that pulled you into that tight circle very quickly? And you were a young person.
On a hot summer afternoon, I received a call. Edwina and I, my wife, who's at the back of this room, my wife of 61 mostly happy years, is back there. And there she is. There she is. And she is the reason I did this book. But more than that, I just urge you not to become the workaholic that I did. I particularly urge young people in their careers not to do it. Balance out your lives with fun, with play. Those two words were almost like guilt to even think about play work. LBJ was a workaholic. He liked for everybody to work around the clock to the extent possible, work Saturdays to the extent possible. Linda Robb is sitting here in the front row, and she can tell you because he applied some of the same rules to his daughters as he did to his workers. He really did believe, and he would grade Linda and Lucy. You always were struggling at the Johnson White House to get LBJ's approval. He gave you grades. A+ on that, Linda. A+ on that, Lucy. A+ on that. So we were all trying to get A+. And in any case, I also, as related to my depression, I think you can work your way into depression. And in part, I know that I did. And I must tell you, I'm still trying to shake it. I had 2 psychiatrists who I talked with, and they said, "Tom, the only way that we can get it where you're no longer driven is to give you a frontal lobotomy." It's a part of my character, and I think I'll always have it. I do believe that I've tried to become a better husband to Edwina and a better parent to my 2 children. I had neglected our 2 children when I was at the White House and other times in their young years. I was out the door before they were really up. I was coming home late at night after they frequently had gone to bed. Thank God for having the kind of spouse who not only worked with me, but also eventually she was one that demanded that I go to see a psychiatrist because she saw the depression coming on and really becoming more serious.
You write poignantly about that, Tom, and very candidly and almost painfully about that in the book. And I think it's something that I think a lot of people in Washington can probably identify with, because this is a city of workaholics and a lot of people who probably do have second and third thoughts about how much time they spend with families and with loved ones. But back on that Lyndon Johnson White House experience, you were there from 1965 until he left the White House in January of 1969.
Yes.
And you saw a lot. You were the note taker. There are wonderful pictures in here of you hunched over your notebook or your journal, taking copious, detailed notes in meetings with the people who were making critical decisions about the war in Vietnam, about the biggest decisions before the President of the United States. How did you handle that kind of pressure? I mean, you knew you were at the center of the universe.
I need to emphasize first, on day one, when I arrived at the White House, a person who became a lifetime close friend. We recently have lost Bill Moyers. I met Bill for the first time and I walked into his office, and within about 10 minutes he said, "I'd like you to meet some other people around here." And Bill walked me right into the Oval Office on my first day. President Johnson said to me, "Tom, we have no experience with this fellowship. This is the first year of it, and so we plan to just treat you like a full-time member of the staff." From that day forward, rather than thinking of myself as an intern, I found myself sort of pulled in. I also asked President Johnson why he didn't get somebody from the CIA or one of the intelligence agencies to do these notes. Keep in mind, there were no Sony Walkmen at that time. I mean, think about that. There were no Sony Walkmen.
And now, you didn't take shorthand. You didn't know shorthand.
I didn't know shorthand. So LBJ sent me to take shorthand at 7 a.m. with another White House assistant, and it was not Greg's shorthand. It was speed writing. I learned speed writing, but I could tell you the next day I could not decipher what I had been writing when I tried it. I still remember that a dot was the word "the." I remember that, but it was a different form. But in any case, I was treated as a. I also said, "Mr. President, you know, not only could you get somebody far more skilled, you could get somebody that's trained." He said, "Well, Tom, I wanted somebody I absolutely could trust." Trust was so important to him. No leaks. Even though I was a press officer, leaks were lethal. I mean, you're out of there if you leak. And that was a problem for some. Even Vice President Humphrey leaked and cost him a real relationship with LBJ. That's true. We loved Hubert Humphrey. But Vice President Humphrey, how can you not love Hubert Humphrey? But he just loved to talk about his experiences and talk with great fervor about his experiences. And as a result, he was not invited to those Tuesday lunch meetings.
The president was huge. Who else in the White House what did you, I mean, there were so many interesting relationships you wrote about. And again, this is during Vietnam. There were enormous decisions being made day after day after day about how to pursue the war at that time. Talk about the relationships you saw between the president and others.
LBJ did not welcome criticism. Linda. If you would convey information to him privately, and he knew that you were a person that he could trust, and he could talk with you about how the war was going and not going, it seemed that that person, and George Ball at that time, under Secretary of State, had that relationship with him, and sometimes would come in and forcefully argue about the course that we're on in Vietnam. He also said, when I pressed him on this being the note taker, he said, "I trust you as much as I do Richard Russell." And in that case, Russell was his longtime friend, although they had all been a part of the Dixiecrats earlier in life. Senator Russell had probably more influence in guiding LBJ on his rise in the Congress, into the Senate, into the vice presidency, and into the White House than any single person. Challenge me, Linda, if you see that I'm missing it. Okay? There's a lot of folks in this room that I know the stories here quite well, and not just about the White House. I should tell you, I was so focused on taking those GD notes that I sometimes was just, I had tunnel vision. And I was not adequately appreciating what was being said in the meetings at the time. I was so convinced I need to get the notes right. Take them back, retype them, give them to Connie Girard, a White House press secretary, to be retyped, and then one copy would exist. And it went to the president's night reading, came back, and then went into super, super secure, and those notes never went into the Pentagon papers. But it was an incredible experience, and I guess I hope that many of you will have a chance now that they've been declassified to really see, because LBJ so wanted to bring that war to an end. And he tried bombing pauses and bombing. He tried sending secret messages through Henry Kissinger to the North Vietnamese. I mean, nobody could possibly imagine the anguish that LBJ went through. He wanted to bring about peace, and he was not a guy that was considered by so many people as like a war president. If anything, he wanted to, particularly with all the accomplishments of the Great Society on the domestic front, but Vietnam was overshadowing it. And he had two son-in-laws who demanded that they be in the really hot zones of Vietnam. I mean, Chuck Robb would not let us move him anywhere. I mean, he had to be with his Marine company in the hottest areas. I was able to steal from Linda a few times her tapes that she got back from LBJ. I think she now knows that I did that. But he would sit and listen to Chuck Robb giving his reports and the number of his men that he had lost that day. In one case, almost a third of his company.
Tom, you write, and I want to move on from Vietnam, but you do write in the book that it took you many years before you could sit back, if you will, and reflect on what actually happened and what you heard and what you knew, and to come to your own conclusion about whether the pursuit of the war was the right thing or the wrong thing. And you concluded it was the wrong thing. But you wrote that it took you a long time.
It took me a long time. I am loyal. I mean, I may have a lot of different other elements in my life, but I'm a loyal person, and I felt great loyalty. I also looked at the incredible nature of those advisors. You know, here is Robert McNamara, former president of the Ford Motor Company. Here is Dean Rusk, former president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Here is George Bundy and Walt Rostow, just magnificent leaders at Caltech and elsewhere. Not Caltech, but at MIT. And go through it. I had awesome respect. I mean, here I am, a young guy from Macon, Georgia, who has experience working on a Macon telegraph, and I'm sitting there listening to them. I also know that Secretary McNamara probably was the first to really crack. I saw tears in his eyes on occasions. And of course, President Johnson named him to the World Bank. And Bob McNamara called me after President Johnson had named him to the World Bank, and he said, "Tom, was I fired?" And I said, "No, Mr. Secretary, you were not. You had served President Kennedy and President Johnson with such great distinction. But he thought also that you had such interest in the areas of the World Bank to try to make the world a better place peacefully than you had." And I think that's true. Secretary McNamara was also the first person to really go public with his views on it, including a night at the LBJ Library, where a Marine friend of mine, Marine Major Jerry Lindauer, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Lindauer, looked at Secretary McNamara and he said, "Mr. Secretary, what do I say now that you admitted that the course of the war was wrong? What do I say to my men who died under your command, under my command?" And that whole auditorium just went into near total silence. There's McNamara himself. But I also should tell you, in my view, I saw reports coming back from Vietnam, from military assistance Vietnam. That was General Westmoreland. They were mostly very positive reports coming back. We were winning. We were winning. If you go back and see those. But then there's Peter Arnett and David Halberstam and others, the press corps. They're sending back reports that are pissing off the White House. Jack Valenti was said that, Peter Arnett is more dangerous than, I guess, a battalion of Viet Cong. But the reports coming back, and I continue to see these, there was a difference between them. And I had one friend on the White House staff, my age, a guy named Richard Moose, and he and I traveled together. He went on to all kind of high positions in foreign affairs. But Dick was the first person to bring to my attention, sort of shake me and say, "Do you see what we're reading that's coming back from military assistance Vietnam? And of course, LBJ, after the South was overrun during Tet, that incredible period of Tet where the attacks from the North and the Viet Cong just swept over. I mean, it took days and days and weeks to even restore Hue. But anyway, President Johnson called Westy. I was in the room. And he said, Westy, what the hell? You've just told the Congress that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And that particular turning point with Tet was a major, major change. And that point, no longer were the requests for troops just unlimited answered. Westy needed 200,000 more troops on top of 500,000 that were in country. But after the study was conducted by then incoming Secretary Clark Clifford, General Westmoreland, who was a wonderful human being, certainly. We all have a way of talking about whether somebody's good or bad, but General Westmoreland, one of the finest human beings I've ever met. But you know, decisions are made, and those decisions sometimes are made in the context of a group decision. And of course, you know, there were those like General Curtis LeMay who seriously wanted to bomb the North back to the Stone Ages.
It was a painful period. It obviously, as we now know, led to President Johnson deciding not to run again. You returned to Texas with the Johnsons. You helped run major newspapers there. You broke the heart of LBJ and Lady Bird when you decided to take on the Times Mirror Company, the Dallas Times Herald. I'm skipping over a couple of decades here because I want to get to, and you're welcome to come back to it, but I want to get to Ted Turner, who approached you in 1990
Yes.
or so. He spotted you as somebody he wanted to run CNN. You had already written, Tom, that Lyndon Johnson was one of the most, if not the most complicated person you had ever known.
Oh, until I met Ted.
Until you met Ted Turner.
I'm serious.
You
Until I
explained
met
how
Ted
different
Turner.
their complexities were.
Ted is extraordinary, and there are 11 people that I've spotted that have worked with Ted Turner in this room, mostly around the back of the room. And I mean, they were present in many of these meetings, and they can either censor my comments or question them. Eason Jordan, for example, was the head of global news gathering for all of CNN. And was a very young aide, sort of just coming up. He was unable to complete 2 more quarters he needed to get his undergraduate degree. But Ted had so much confidence in him. I had so much confidence in him. He rose to become the senior news executive, and he was my choice to become my successor at CNN. You talk about a workaholic. I mean, I am a mild-mannered workaholic compared to Eason. He now has a very senior position at the Rockefeller Foundation, he is eligible to interrupt me at any time because he was the one person that most often was there with me. We traveled the world together. At one point, Eason sat on his glasses in Beijing and was late for a meeting, and I was pissed off. And I kept saying, why, Eason, are you not here? He had broken his glasses as he in his bed. I guess he was reading and doing it. But we were at other occasions. We were in the desert coming between Baghdad and Amman, this stretch of highway where there's nothing but sand. I mean, nothing but sand, but both of us needed to pee. And I got out and did so. Edwina saying, anyway.
Edwina just stood up and put her hand up.
No, but I want you to know the human side of this is, in a way. But I was able to do so. But the Iraqis were not happy. They wanted. He had, I guess, done damage to that desert. Eason, right or wrong? At one time, he lost me. We traveled to all kind of places. He lost me and had everybody looking for me. And Eason liked to take me in, have a meeting at night, then get up at 7 o'clock, have a meeting at 7 o'clock, fly then to the next stop on it with very little time. So on one of the trips, I snuck off to get a massage. I mean, he had the people going up to my hotel and looking around the bed to see if I'd collapsed on it. But it was a Larry Register in the back. So many others that are here. Asier Hamdar, who's at the back. Shelby, who's here. Edwina saying, make it shorter.
Make it short. Let's come back to Ted Turner for just a second. What was it, or what is it? He's still alive. What is it about Ted Turner?
Ted cares so passionately about this planet. I mean, it is genuine. He cares about the water that we drink, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe. He saw that the United Nations, in his view, was the most important way in which the nations of this world could sit and together discuss the issues, particularly war and peace issues. And I get a call. Ted says, try to get a crew over to the hotel within 30 minutes in New York. I said, Ted, I don't know I can do that, but I'll sure try. So we raced to get a crew out of the New York bureau over to the hotel. And that night, Ted, without any of us knowing, and I've fairly developed some pretty close relationships with Ted and with Jane, but Ted announces a $1 billion gift to the United Nations. I mean, and now all of these properties that he owns, he's putting them back the way those properties were at the time the Native Americans were there. I mean, the bison, the wolves. What's the little prairie dog? The prairie dog. I mean, somehow I was falling in love with the prairie dog. And prairie dogs make these holes, and cattle can step in the prairie dog hole and break their leg or something. But Ted cares so deeply. I mean, it is a genuine thing with him. And I must tell you, when I asked him, what do you expect of the next president of CNN? Me. He said, Tom, I want it to be the best news network on the planet. And I'm sort of there, and I said, well, what else? And he said, that's it, pal. Or when we decided to stay in Baghdad, I called him after getting calls from President Bush, from Colin Powell, and from Marlon Fitzwater saying, get our asses out of Baghdad immediately. They're in grave danger. I called Ted, and before I could even give him the options, he just almost screamed at me, and he said, Tom, our policy will be that those who want to stay in Baghdad, despite those warnings, can stay. And those who want to come out can come out. Then in a higher level, he said, and you will not overturn me, pal. I said, Ted, I wasn't thinking of doing that. But he also said, I know that you lost two of your correspondents, Dal Torgerson and Joe Alex Morris, during my time when I was at the CNN. I helped to take the body bag off the plane of Dal Torgerson. And he said, I know that's bothered you. I've heard people say that losing those two, it's one thing to have people wounded, and we had Margaret Moth, our top combat camera woman, had her face almost shot away in Sarajevo. A sniper just almost blew the bottom part of her face off. But Ted supported what we were doing. He supported the courage, the bravery, and we should have people right now covering this war in the Middle East. We should have those reporters who would like to be in Gaza, despite the incredible risks they have.
They're not allowed to be there.
They should be allowed
Israel.
to.
That's
The
right.
Israelis should allow them in. They should have the opportunity to tell the truth about what's happening there, because all of you are involved in these decisions. And I think it's reprehensible what's going on with press freedom today. I mean, those in this room, most of them I know believe as I do in press freedom. We have this wonderful First Amendment. Thank God for the First Amendment. But, you know, we've got to also not roll over. And I should tell you, the one company that I admire the most, and I'm going to make some people unhappy, but the one news organization I admire the most today is the New York Times. The New York Times is holding its ground. Its editorial policies, its news policies, they are not letting threats of billion-dollar lawsuits keep them from doing what they should be doing.
Tom, you left CNN as president in 2001.
Voluntarily.
Voluntarily. Here we are, 24 years later, how has the news industry changed? You just touched on it. You talked about the threats to press freedom. You talked about the New York Times. What has happened in your mind to the news industry, to the news business in that period?
The magnificent formula that we had for so many years could no longer exist in the new world. The old formula was newspapers would get about 20% of their revenues from their circulation, subscriptions, and about 80%, and it varied from company to company, about 80% from advertising. Well, of course, when the new revolution began and advertisers started moving over to electronics, when people stopped paying their subscriptions, at least in print, but were beginning to pay for subscriptions online. And again, the New York Times has done the best job by far of converting their traditional subscribers over to digital, and they are now at a point where they are profitable, healthy, but also diversified. The New York Times isn't the old New York Times. It still does tremendous hard news and has worldwide bureaus. But what I love from the Sulzbergers is courage, determination to continue to be a newspaper, which increasingly, as all of you know, I'm not very positive about Fox News, but I am very positive about what Rupert has done with the Wall Street Journal. They are doing an outstanding job, in my view, at the Journal today. And it's ironic to have Rupert and now Lachin overseeing these two very different properties.
But at the same time, we know so many newspapers have closed down across the country. We have what we call news deserts, where there is no news coverage, and we have some efforts now by nonprofits to kickstart news coverage in different parts of the country. Is there a business formula out there that works that you see?
If there is a strategy that is working, it is the strategy of the New York Times. I do believe also at the Wall Street Journal, for the Wall Street Journal, there's a strategy that's working. Most people don't know that there's an advisory board at the Wall Street Journal made up of some very, very solid former news directors that you almost never hear about it. But Lou Bacardi, for example, former head of the AP, is on that board. And so I must say, as tough as it is to say anything nice about Rupert and my old friend Roger Ailes, and he was my friend. I never had a birthday without getting a note for Roger Ailes. I didn't realize the full extent of Roger's sins. Thank you.
Tom, you do write, as we heard earlier, openly, candidly about your battles with depression. How do you think that has shaped you as a person?
It had a very profound effect on me. I didn't expect it. I thought I was like, Superman who could leap the tallest building and do whatever it took. But Ed Winner, who's sitting in the back, saw it coming before I did. I've said the importance of not becoming a workaholic. I also would like to just if I could leave with one single statement for this audience, depression is a treatable illness. I'm going to take that one home. Today, there are meds and therapies that can enable most depression sufferers from getting better. But there's a spouse of one of my absolute best friends in life who took his own life a few years ago, and what a loss. I mean, this guy it was astounding what he could do. And I fished with him, and I hunted with him, and he taught me how to set the damn hook. And I'd never seen him set the hook properly, but we loved but he took his own life. And then I had another one, a Marine colonel, former Marine colonel, who rose to become the military assistant to two secretaries of defense here in town. And he had depression. He drove his convertible out to a bridge in Austin and jumped. I did my best with both of them. my friend from Dallas would call me and say, "Tom, I'm in the ditch," and that I knew was that he was really having a hard time. But I just hope that all of you who have a friend or have something in your own family or looking at something to support, this is an area where today we are making great progress. And depression is a treatable illness, yet there are still many hundreds of thousands of people who have it, not only here, but around the world. So it have really a sense that we can make progress. And, I guess I'm a better person today in many ways because I dealt with it so privately. Edwina said to me, unless you tell others what's going on with you, you'll never be free. If you just keep it to yourself and go to see your psychiatrist and get in a dark room when you really need to escape from it. But she said you must share it with your closest friends. And those friends have to be people, incidentally, that you trust, that you can work together. There are a lot of people, I bet, in this room tonight battling depression. I bet there are people in this room tonight who haven't told anybody except perhaps a girlfriend or boyfriend or at times very difficult to do. Particularly, it's been seen as a sign of weakness. I mean, you can imagine you're the publisher of the LA Times or you're the chairman of CNN and you're going to tell people that you have depression. Well, some people think of depression as such a mental illness that it can literally stop your progression in a company, that people will not want to promote a person. Even military will not want to promote them to higher ranks.
It's a powerful, powerful message. We want to open it up for questions. I have many more on my list, but I'm looking at the clock and I want to respect the plan here at Politics and Prose. And we have a gentleman standing right here. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being here today, to both of you. My name is Nathan, and I'm a recent college graduate from here in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm hoping ultimately to teach about civil rights history, and that's something I've been passionate about for a long time. My question is, I was reading with great interest your description of being in the Oval Office at the time of Dr. King's assassination and informing President Johnson of the tragic news, and I was wondering, what are your strongest memories of that experience, and what would you like people today and in future generations to know about what you experienced then?
And there's even a picture in the book of the moment when he was handed that. You handed him that.
One of my major duties as a young White House aide was to check the tickers periodically and rip the tickers if I saw anything that should go directly into the president. Here's somebody who knows so much about the inside workings of this. She also tried to get me on the Council of Foreign Relations once, and I should have done it. But the ticker, if it's a bulletin, will just start a few rings. From the AP or UPI ticker machine. And in this case, though, there was a loud, continuing ring of the bells on both. But the one that I ripped first was a UPI ticker, and it said, Dr. Martin Luther King has been shot in Memphis. That was it. I ripped it, walked in, and there are occasions when I can walk into the Oval Office without getting cleared by the President's Secretary or the President's Chief of Staff. His secretary, Juanita Roberts, was a full colonel, incidentally, in the Army. Marie Fama was a much easier person to deal with, who was one of his other secretaries. But I walked in, and I carried it in, and I was almost shaking. Sitting to President Johnson's right was Robert Woodruff, the then chairman of the Coca-Cola Company. Sitting to his left was Carl Sanders, the former governor of Georgia. I handed the note just gently to President Johnson. He read it and just slumped back into his chair. I mean, physically just slumped back into his chair. He then handed the note to Mr. Woodruff, who read it, who handed it back to LBJ, who handed it to Carl Sanders. President Johnson then started the calls to Mrs. King, to Director Hoover, to right on through. LBJ was the best man in a crisis that I've ever seen or read about. I mean, even though he has a reputation in different ways, but in a crisis, there was just sort of a solid, he knew what to do. Maybe that was a result of the years in the House, the years in the Senate, the years of the vice presidency, but he knew. And then he just started calling the Attorney General, then Ramsey Clark, LBJ asked the two to just sit there for a few minutes, not try to say goodbye, say hello to everybody, but just sit there. So they were there for the first 15 minutes. He, who had been a member of the old segregationist bloc of the so-called Dixiecrats, then he had become a very fierce advocate of civil rights and voting rights. He had been able to pass those two bills at enormous efforts. Frankly, also having the bipartisanship he was able to mobilize bipartisanship in the most amazing way. But he then called for a meeting of all the black leaders the next day in the cabinet room and made arrangements for us to fly them in on jet stars or whatever to get them there. But he wanted to go to work to do whatever he could do. And they basically said, Mr. President, we've got to do far more than what you're doing. You're doing a lot, and you are our guy. And Dr. King had become a strong advocate of LBJ, which later changed because of Vietnam. But he used an expression. He said, I always thought that I would do much more about civil rights if I ever got the power. And now I have the power, and by God, I am going to use it. But it also took bipartisanship. It took the leaders of the Jewish community. It took the leaders of the black community, particularly Dr. King. It took AFL-CIO, the leaders of AFL-CIO and the labor movement. It took conservatives as well as liberals to do what it took to put in place the programs that came later. I know he wanted to do more, particularly for the poor. His experience in Catula as a young teacher, where the Mexican Americans came to class frequently with no shoes, frequently with no lunch that they've had, that experience when he was a young teacher, I think had a profound impact on him. And people have asked me, well, what about those years when he was a part of the Dixiecrats? In a way, yes, it's true. But when he finally had the power to do what he felt was needed in the field of civil rights, by God, he did it.
I'm tempted to ask you what you think President Johnson would make of today.
Well, he would be totally devastated. He would be totally devastated. He believed in bipartisanship. I mean, he believed in working across the aisle. He believed in getting, like Senator Dirksen, down in the evening after Senator Dirksen had come out on a bill that LBJ wanted passed, but Senator Dirksen on a Friday came out against the bill. LBJ pulled Dirksen down. I was there into the little office by the main office in the Oval Office, and President Johnson made his case to Senator Dirksen. Senator Dirksen says, Lyndon, I cannot do it. And about that time, a young aide named Jim Jones, who later became a congressman, came in with some papers, and LB said to him, now, Ev, I want you to know, totally aside from what we're discussing, but my staff is recommending that Veterans Center that you so want should be built in Austin. There are more veterans near Austin. It's less expensive to build a Veterans Center in there than in Ohio. And anyway, and Senator Dirksen said, now, Lyndon, don't do that to me. Well, Monday, Senator Dirksen reversed himself. The reporters asked, I was present, said, Senator, how could you do that? And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a wiser person today than I was Friday. Well, you might imagine the Veterans Center is still there, and LBJ got the bill passed that he wanted to pass. Now, to me, that's not wheeler dealing. To me, that's bipartisanship. That's government at its best. There was no money exchange. There was no laws broken. Each of them achieved what they hoped to achieve, but also we were not permitted to punish anybody for voting against us Wayne Morse would vote against us on every bill that relates to Vietnam, but he would support us on every civil rights bill. LBJ says you don't punish somebody for voting against you on this bill because we will need them on the next bill. And I mean, he was a master tactician. He was not a diplomat. LBJ was not a diplomat. He was a full-scale politician, and he loved it. He loved the role and gave all that he could give until his heart finally started giving out.
Question.
I don't want to let the evening pass without having a chance for you to tell us about how you met Otis Chandler and became the publisher of the LA Times. And your thoughts on Otis. Tom Rosenstiel from the LA Times.
It was then the chair of the Times Mirror company.
Otis Chandler was the chairman of the Times Mirror Company that owned Newsday, Hartford, Stanford, Greenwich, Dallas Times Herald, Denver Post, LA Times, Orange County, everything, cable, the works. Well, Linda's family decided they needed to sell either the cable company in Austin or the TV station. Otis Chandler had learned through their mutual friend, Jack Valenti, that they were considering selling KTBC, this highly successful CBS affiliate. And so they came to meet with President and Mrs. Johnson. I was present in those meetings. I was a little bit more than a note taker, but I was very much involved. And they made a deal. And it involved me making sure that we introduced all of the leaders of Austin to the Chandlers and the Chandlers to all of them. At one point in my life, I had a miraculous memory. It must have been God-given. I don't know, but much of it's gone. But in any case, I had to introduce to the Chandlers, say the head of Roy Butler, the head of the auto dealership, who also owned a beer dealership, and his wife, Ann. Roy had become mayor, and Ann was a civic force. But I was able to introduce everybody that came through that line to Otis. And afterwards, he said to one of his people who was with him, said, "I've never seen anything quite like that." I just somehow the good Lord gave me quite a memory, I guess. But in any case, Otis said, "What do you plan to do after the sale of the TV station?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Chandler, I may go back to my profession. Knight Ridder owns my former newspaper in Macon. They've offered me an opportunity to come back." And he said, "Before you make a decision, I'd like to think more about it." And then this is a remarkable, I'll just give it a short. He came back a couple of weeks later and outlined a plan for me that if I would stay in Austin while the license was being transferred from the Johnson family to the Chandlers, that he would then like me to come to Los Angeles as like to understudy him, or go to Dallas, and not go to Dallas just as a staffer, but to go to Dallas as editor of the newspaper, which was the 10th largest newspaper in the nation at the time. It was unbelievable. The Dallas Times Herald and the Dallas News had a fierce rivalry, unbelievable. Well, anyway, he not only said that, he said, I think Mr. Chandler would be better if I go through Dallas to prove that I can really do it. And he agreed. And he also said that if you work out as the editor of the paper, I'll make you publisher of the Dallas Times Herald. And he did. And he also had said, if that works out, if you're running the Dallas newspaper, all aspects of it, that did. He said, then I want you to come to Los Angeles as president of the Los Angeles Times, running all departments except news, even though he insisted that I attended the daily editorial meeting, unlike what some of the staff members there wanted me to be. They thought I was sort of Bush League out of Texas or Georgia. I was not sort of a power in the media world at all. But in any case, the 3 years as president of the Times worked out, and he then decides to name me the first non-Chandler of that newspaper. And I must just tell you, though, it all goes back to that publisher in Macon had the confidence in me at a very young age to send me and get a really quality education, believed in me, had confidence in me. And I must tell you, that's something I try to do with all the young people that I've worked with over the years. There are five people in this room who I've had a lot to do with their careers, and I must tell you how proud I am of the 5. I think there may be even more than 5 in this room. I have loved working, helping to see people have the same opportunities that I've had. And I should also say that just because I turned 84 today, I haven't stopped. I'm not going to be measured in my final 8th inning. I'm not going to be measured by my golf handicap. I'm going to be measured by what I can do to make a difference for the rest of it. And Edwina, she has said that if I try to write another book, it would be with another wife.
We don't think that's happening. Speaking of people who work with you, for you, Kevin Bond.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for doing
Hello,
this. For
Kevin
a lot of
Bond.
people
Yes.
here, we respected you a lot, and we appreciate your leadership. When you began CNN, I know people are going to be hard to believe. CNN was not widely known.
Nope.
It was not satellite in Washington for a long time. It was a major 11 years, a huge CNN, a lot of ups and a lot of downs. What was the biggest up besides the Gulf War, and the biggest downs that you had to deal with in learning television, running a whole television news network?
I approved at least 3 articles. I approved at least 3 articles that turned out not to be true. And one of them was called Operation Tailwind. It was a story about how during Vietnam that we had sent special forces in to try to capture or kill a group of people that were in Cambodia, or Laos, I guess, Laos at the time. And I apologize for that. I'm still apologizing. I should have never let that story go to air. We then created a very strong standards and act, including a person who was here in Washington for many years, Rick Davis. Not Rick Kaplan, Rick Davis. I know them both well. But in any case, making journalistic mistakes. I also learned from that you don't apologize on bottom of page 3 of the New York Times. I think when you make a mistake, you should give the mistake and the apology the same play that it received at the time you made the original mistake. On another occasion, we basically reported that Cardinal Bernardin had sexual misconduct, and the Cardinal called me the next day and just, Tom, said, I can assure you with every ounce of truthfulness in me that I have never violated my vows. Now, why the original reporting on that had not uncovered that, but I still grieve over the mistakes that we've made. And I must tell you, every news organization needs a really strong standards and practice. We had one major reporter that did not like her scripts being pre-checked before they went to air. She worked for Eason. But I think it's important, no matter whether you're Wolf Blitzer, no matter what, Larry Bresci, we really have to make sure that what we are doing, I think there are 2 things that media leaders must assure. 2. One, that it is factual, and Ted felt it should be fair. Now, to me, accuracy is the most important of them all. I mean, get it right. But second is fairness. And Ted felt, look, if the war is going on in Iraq, and we want to report what Saddam is saying to Bernie Shaw, what's wrong with that? We're getting briefings at the Pentagon, we're getting briefings at the State Department, we're getting briefings at the White House. And so what's wrong with letting Saddam give you his opinion, whatever? We didn't say that he was, but it was trying to give both sides to the extent you can give both sides.
What was the
He
high?
also asked you about a high point. You just gave us the low.
Where's the high? Gulf War, obviously. Where's the high point besides the Gulf War?
I love CNN. I love the people. I mean, it's sort of I know it may sound a little weird, but being able to lead that incredibly exciting team, and let me tell you, not all of them were Phi Beta Kappas. I mean, they were workers. They were people like Nick Robertson, who started the bottom of the bucket in the production department, but devised this 4-wire so we could be able to report and circumvent the Iraqi government communications and powers system. But to me, I love the LA Times too. I have to say, I really love the LA Times. I was mostly a print guy. And incidentally, there's some things you can do in print you can't do in TV. Same true. But in print, you can go long.
Right.
You can't. And see, in television, too often you can just go short to get it in. And of course, we had headline news. But I love my two jobs. I wish that every person who is out to find their passion could have found it the way that I have. And that's, you ask Edwina, she's probably the only person in this room that knows me. Maybe next to her is Dee Dee Rose that knows me next best on it, who flew in from Dallas to just come here tonight. But it's people that you have a chance to get to know what they mean to you, and the friendships. I mean, you aren't really supposed to become friends with those who work for you, because you may find yourself having to fire them. But I am. I have this tendency to really love the people I work with. That is not bullshit. I enjoy. And I think they would say to you that they enjoyed working with me, both in my 11 years at CNN and my 17 years at the LA Times. And I also felt like journalism is maybe the strongest public service that you can do. I mean, what reporters can do, what editors can do. And I just want to say this last thing. It isn't the editors and the reporters that are problems today. The editors and reporters can still do terrific reporting at the Washington Post, at the New York Times, at CNN. I mean, it's the owners. The significant problem of today, those who own the media, the billionaires, are the ones. And again, how the Sulzbergers have been able to continue to navigate through all of this, and I'm sure that they've thought long and hard themselves about when they see some of these potentially billion-dollar lawsuits. This is an honorable profession. I mean, it's unlike almost anything else. I mean, I know there are people who love public service. She's loved public service. She's made a difference in this town for the number of few years that she's just happened to be here. But I mean, it's in my soul almost, the importance of good journalism. It is not bullshit. It's something that I've always felt, and I still do.
Thank you, sir.
Tom Johnson, the book. Is there another question? Please come forward. We've got another minute. Tom Johnson, the book is Driven. Thank you, Tom.
I did not get to tell you the story of my recruiting Judy Woodruff. Judy was very happy in public television. She was very happy in her role. Everything was going so well. Al was always supportive, then as now, but I so wanted her to become our anchor. She had all the qualities of integrity and her reputation with Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, all exceptionally high. I even ran surveys on her. But there came a time I kept looking for an opportunity that I can really make a passionate plea to her. And Katharine Graham was giving a dinner party for President Clinton. And she and Al were there. And by God, I was as rude as could possibly be. I circumvented a lot of things that night just to get around to her and tell her, this is an opportunity for you to be the anchor of the world's largest network, a network that goes into every nation virtually on the planet. This is a chance, and public television is terrific. And anyway, after a lot of work, and she did agree. And I would say that one of my very, very best hires of all time. Shelby Coffey would question that. Shelby would say that he's the best hire that I've ever made. And Wolf certainly would. I mean,
I don't know who out there Tom had in mind when he said earlier that you could afford lots of copies of his books. But to you and everybody else, copies are available at the checkout desk at the front. He'll be here signing.
Buy many copies.
Please form a line to the right of the table, and please help our staff by folding up your chairs. Thanks again for coming.